Hey, this is Jeffrey Gurian here, and I'm a comedy writer and a comedian and a radio guy and a doctor and an author. And I was just interviewed by Keith Andrew on his show for the Keith Andrew Network. And Keith is doing a really, really admirable job. It's a show about overcoming disabilities and obstacles in your life, and it's absolutely perfect. So I was really happy to do the show, and I hope you'll tune in and listen. And you can order my book, which is called Fight the Fear, Overcoming Obstacles That Stand in Your Way, which is perfect for this show and just came out today.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am your host, Keith Andrew, and this is episode 716. I'm here with Jeffrey Gurian, and I just want to say thank you for being a guest on my talk show.
Thanks so much for having me, Keith. I think what you're doing is really, really important. Very important to help people, and that's why I was looking forward to being on your show.
No, it's a real honor and privilege. Like I always say to my guests, you're supporting a good cause, and you make a new friend out of it.
Absolutely.
For people who want to know what my talk show is about, the whole point of my talk show is to show people that even with having a learning disability, I can still amount to something. And at the same time, I'm able to turn myself into an example for people out there dealing with any types of learning disabilities and disabilities to never give up and prove people wrong. Prove to them that labels do not dictate who you are and who you want to be. And to prove to them you can still amount to something. So hashtag break the label. With that being said, 26 minutes of your time, freedom of speech, self-expression, say anything you want, PG-13. But with that being said, you have the freedom to say anything you want. And for everyone who wants to know who Jeffrey Gurian is, you are a two-time book author. You're also a comedian writer, a comedian, and also, like me, a radio host.
Well, one of the things that you didn't mention was I'm also a doctor and a former professor in oral medicine and orofacial pain. I was a cosmetic dentist for many years. And when I was tested for learning disabilities, the doctor who tested me said that my learning disabilities were so severe that he was amazed that I could graduate from school. He said, you must have had to work 10 times as hard as everyone else. And that's very true, because I battled so many different things. Learning disabilities cause a lot of confusion, and that leads to fear. When you think that everyone else around you understands what's going on, but you don't, it makes you feel very outside, like an outcast, you know? On top of that, I stuttered very badly for many years. I've had to overcome many, many disabilities, and I was given the grace to figure out how to conquer stuttering. I started stuttering when I was about 6 or 7 years old, and it lasted well through my 20s and beyond. And I stuttered so badly that I couldn't say my name. I could never say Gurian. Most stutterers have a very hard time saying their own names. And what makes sense to me, and as an avocation, I work with stutterers and I teach them my technique of how I cured myself. But my feeling is that your name is your identity. It's who you are. And if you don't feel good about who you are, you don't feel comfortable telling other people who you are. You don't feel comfortable sharing it. Let me take my phone off the hook. I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm so sorry.
Anything can happen live.
I thought I did that already. Okay, but it's off the hook now. What I was saying, see, I lost my train of thought for a minute. I was talking about how I was able to conquer stuttering. When I went to college, I made myself run for the president of the freshman class. And I did that. It was very hard for me because I couldn't say my name. So I had other kids introduce me to kids I didn't know. Say, hey, this is Jeffrey Gurian. He's running for president. And I told myself that if I could win that election, I wouldn't have to stutter anymore, because it would show me that people liked me. Because I must have had a feeling that it had to do with how I felt about myself and how people felt about me. And it was a great example for me, because I won the election. I was the president of the freshman class of Hunter College, and it was a very big school, and I still stuttered. And it taught me a great lesson. It taught me that outside validation doesn't work in your life. It doesn't matter how many people tell you that you're wonderful and talented and fantastic. It matters what you think of yourself. And I decided that I was going to help myself, because no speech therapists were able to help me. My parents sent me for therapy, and it wasn't doing any good. But one day I realized that I didn't stutter when I was alone. I could go into a room by myself and speak fine. But I only stuttered when I was trying to talk to somebody else, which told me that there was really nothing wrong with me, that I must have created it, because you can't have a disability based on your location. You know, a man with a limp limps in every room of his house. He can't go into a room alone, close the door, and walk perfectly, right? But if I could speak good when I was by myself, then it means that I created this in my mind. Somehow I gave myself a disability. And what I learned is that any thought that you create, you can also uncreate. The mind is very powerful. And if you can learn to control your thoughts, you can learn to control a lot of things that seem to be uncontrollable. And I talk a lot about spirituality, which is very different than religion. And I'll explain it very briefly and why I'm bringing it up. Because spirituality tells us that we're basically all the same. Religion can be wonderful for people, but it tends to divide us because it puts you into a category and other people are outside of that category. Spirituality brings us all together, because all it asks is that you believe in something greater than yourself, some force that makes the sun come out and the moon come out and the tides change. We're not doing that. There's something, there's some greater force, and you could call it nature or the universe or God, whatever is comfortable for you, as long as you know it isn't you. Because when you think that it's you, you tend to blame yourself when things don't go the way you'd like them to, right? Everyone has a dream. Everyone has thoughts of what they should be doing and what they should accomplish. And if you're trying to get something and you're not getting it, the message is you're not supposed to think that you're being punished, that you're the ultimate victim of the universe. You're supposed to think that there's something better in store for you than that, than what you wanted. And if you got what you wanted, you wouldn't be available for the really good thing that's coming to you. But you have to have patience, because we don't get everything exactly when we want it. Sometimes we have to work for things. So I worked very hard for many years to look at my thoughts, to see which of my thoughts were not valid. Learning disabilities are true disabilities. The prayer that I was talking about, there's something called the Serenity Prayer. And it says, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. That's the most important line, the wisdom to know the difference. So I was given the grace to have the wisdom to know that stuttering was not something I couldn't control. If I didn't realize that, I'd still be stuttering today. Acceptance is for things you can't change. If you have a learning disability, if you have some kind of chemical thing going on in your body, you may not be able to change it, but you can get on top of it. You don't have to let it crush you. You can achieve goals despite the fact that you have certain things that you have to deal with. Everyone is given obstacles in their life that they have to overcome. No one's perfect. And many of us went through bullying as children because of our disabilities. And that led to my first book. By the way, you had mentioned that I had 2 books. I have 7 books, but 2 of my books are about happiness and how to change the way you think and how to overcome obstacles. So my first book, which hit bestseller status on Amazon, it's called Healing Your Heart by Changing Your Mind, a spiritual and humorous approach to achieving happiness. And healing your heart does not refer to heart disease. Although I did have a heart attack in 2015, But what helped me get through it were the principles in this book about positive thinking. Positive thinking is very important. That's why your show is so important, because it allows people who have certain disabilities to learn that you can rise above them, that you don't have to be limited in your life because of certain things that were not your choice. You know? So what I refer to as heart wounds is since you're a child, every single time that someone hurt your feelings or broke a promise to you or hurt you in some way, broke up with you in a relationship, told you you couldn't do something when you knew you could do it, I call those things heart wounds. And they stay inside of us in our heart chakra. And they affect every decision that we make. They affect your self-esteem, they affect your self-confidence, and they affect every decision, because every time you're called upon to make a decision in your life, you think about what you should do. You think about your choices. Because who else's thoughts can you use but your own, right? And if your thoughts are faulty, if you're carrying these heart wounds, these negative thoughts about yourself, if you believe the things that the bullies said to you when you were kids, then your decisions are not going to work for you, because they're going to tell you that you can't do it. And so part of what I talk about when I talk about healing your heart is examining your thoughts to see what thoughts you're holding that are not valid for you. And you have to release those thoughts and realize that they were given to you by people who didn't have your best interests at heart, by people who didn't really care about you. They wanted to hurt you in some way. And on some level, we believed part of what they were saying, and we held on to it. There's this stupid saying that they teach us when we're kids, and it says, "Sticks and stones will break your bones, but words will never harm you," which is the furthest from the truth. Absolutely the furthest from the truth, because all the bruises you got as a kid healed up a long time ago. But every one of us can remember something that someone said that hurt our feelings, and we can remember it like it was yesterday. It doesn't go away. And those things affect everything in our lives. So I had to deal with a lot of that in order, as you can see, I no longer stutter, and it's complete grace. I worked very hard for many years. I was obsessed with learning how not to stutter. And now as an avocation, I work with people all over the world, and I teach them how not to stutter, because that message is not getting out. Even stuttering institutes, they're telling people you have to accept the fact that you stutter. And they continue to allow them to stutter and to honor the fact that they stutter. And again, acceptance is wonderful. There are things that we can't change about ourselves that you must accept. But there are other things that you don't have to accept. And I rejected that I had to accept being a stutterer. And now I no longer stutter. And I teach that to people. It's about controlling your thoughts, changing your mind, literally changing your mind. That's why the title is Healing Your Heart by Changing Your Mind, a spiritual and humorous approach to achieving happiness. Because I always use humor. Even when I had a heart attack and I was on the operating table and they were putting a stent in my heart and I was still partly awake, and I said to the doctor, "I feel you in my heart," not in a romantic way, but I feel you in my heart. And he said, "Okay, I'll give you more anesthetic." And I don't remember anything after that, but he saved me. But I was joking around. I recently caught COVID double pneumonia, and I was in the hospital. And it was a very difficult time. I live in New York City. I caught it at the end of March, when New York City was the epicenter of the virus. I was sick for 2 weeks before I went to the hospital, because I kept hoping it was going to go away. I kept thinking maybe it's just a cold, maybe it's a regular virus, but I kept getting worse and worse and worse. And I was afraid to go to the hospital because of my heart condition. I was in a high-risk category. And they always say, you know, you can get even sicker by going to the hospital. The emergency room is filled with germs. But after 2 weeks, I couldn't take it anymore. Luckily, and again, this is grace. This is the spiritual aspect. On the third day that I was sick, it went to my throat, and I was hoping it was just a cold. And whenever I get a sore throat, I take Z-Pak. So I'm a doctor. I have Z-Pak in the house all the time. As soon as it went to my throat, I started on Z-Pak. and it's usually a 5-day course. But I took it for 10 days because I wasn't getting better, but it was protecting my throat. But I still had fever and body pain and every symptom that comes with COVID, except that I could still breathe. So I was still hoping that I didn't have COVID. But after 2 weeks, I was so sick I couldn't move. I was bleeding from my nose. I had to call an ambulance. And in New York at the time, they didn't just come for you in an ambulance when you dial 911. They interviewed you first to find out what symptoms you were having.
Yeah.
Because there were so many people requesting ambulances. But when they saw how sick I was and that I was bleeding from my nose and I had a heart condition, they said, we'll be right over for you.
I remember when in February, I worked over at Walmart. I actually got a double whammy. First I got, I kind of figured, something going around because it was a stomach virus. Okay, I got that. But on top of that, what I didn't know.
What city are you in? What city are you in?
I'm near Central Valley, New York, near Woodbury Commons.
Oh, so you're upstate. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when I was okay, got a stomach virus, that explains why, I'm vomiting pretty much every day. And I was a wreck, I could walk around, but there's some days where I couldn't even leave my room. Thank God I have a garbage can here because I end up throwing up in the garbage can and going back in bed, waking up and repeating. Then when I went to urgent care, they're like, oh, yeah, okay, you had the stomach virus. And the nurse looked at the other nurse and said, did you tell him yet? And I was like, well, this is February, and you guys don't really have to test it for corona. Otherwise, I have cancer. Well, what is there that you're not telling me? It's like, oh, you have strain A flu. So I had the double whammy. Of course, I couldn't stop wrenching in the urgent care, so I got a ambulance ride. Tell you, I was in an ambulance only 2 times in my life. One when I was in a car accident when I was 15, and nothing bad happened. Well, my mom got banged up, but nothing happened to me. Second time is when I got sick, and they're like, well, you can go home. And I'm thinking, well, it took enough strength to get here right now. So if I go home and do the whole thing all over again, it's got to be a whole big episode. Said, you know what? I'm here in urgent care. Let's go to the nearest hospital. And I was sitting in the back of the ambulance like this, watching the cars go by. I got the worst case of motion sickness I ever had in my life.
Well, I'll tell you something. You mentioned nausea. When I had COVID, I was nauseous from morning to night, but I couldn't throw up. I had fever that was nonstop, and I would get night sweats. And usually when you get night sweats, the fever leaves. Right. But with this virus, the fever just came right back again. So when I got to the hospital, they wheeled me into the emergency room, and they put me next to a woman who was screaming. And I don't know if you remember, normal blood pressure is 120/80. Yeah. My 80 had dropped to 42. My circulatory system was collapsing. It was hard for them to find a vein. But on my second day, they gave me that drug, hydroxychloroquine, and that saved me. The fact that I didn't know that I was taken to NYU Hospital. I didn't know that they were doing research on hydroxychloroquine, using it with Z-Pak, which is what I had taken for 10 days, and zinc sulfate. When they found out that I had been on Z-Pak for 10 days, they didn't have to give me more, but they started me on a double dose of hydroxychloroquine. And I try to say that wherever I speak, because there's so much misinformation about it. They're telling you how dangerous it is. It's been around for 65 years, and it's saving people's lives. You could save a lot of people by using that. I have a heart condition, and I had no side effects from it. I got a double dose in the morning and a double dose at night, and by the next day, when they took the oxygen off me, my oxygen stayed at 95 to 96%. And they were able to send me home to continue recuperating after 4 days, because at first I was in isolation for 2 days, but because the hospitals were so overcrowded, they put me in a room with 3 other very sick men, all with the virus. and that was a nightmare. We were all sharing one small bathroom. One of the guys had to be rushed to a ventilator because his breathing had dropped from 93 to 80% within minutes. That's what this virus does. So I came home, and I came home in an ambulance too. I was sick for 2 months in total. When I got home, I got sicker because I came down with something called pleurisy, which is an inflammation of the lungs, and all my glands swelled up. It was crazy, but there was a lot of kindness. I got tremendous kindness. My super went shopping for me. I had a neighbor who went shopping for me every couple of days. She left bags of food outside my door. She would ask me what I needed, and I was reluctant to tell her because I'm used to helping people, but I'm not used to receiving.
Right.
And I had to learn that there's an art to doing that too, that when people want to help you, I said to her, what did I do to deserve your kindness? And she said, you're helping me become a better person. And I said, that's amazing. And literally for weeks, she brought me food because I didn't leave my house. I had PTSD. Even when I got better after 2 months, I was afraid to leave the house because the first time I ever went out, I wore 2 masks. I couldn't even breathe because I was so nervous that I could catch it again because they still don't know if you can catch it.
Well, the one my dad read said you can actually catch it again.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. So I'm being very, very careful. And all of this stuff led to my second book, which coincidentally, Keith, came out today on Amazon. I don't have the cover yet to show you, but I sent it to you if you have a way of posting it. It's called Fight the Fear, Overcoming Obstacles That Stand in Your Way. And my learning disabilities create a lot of fear for me because technology is hard. Traveling is almost impossible for me because my learning disabilities affect my sense of direction. So I'm always getting lost. I never know where I am. And because of that, I challenge myself. This past October, I went to Japan by myself. It was the scariest thing that I could do because I had a fascination with Japan. I was studying Japanese. And in my Japanese class, everyone said, oh, everyone speaks English. You'll have a great time. The truth is that hardly anyone there speaks English. They speak English in the hotels. But your everyday life, it's like, you know, when you go out in the subway, the maintenance workers are not speaking every language in the world. They speak basically English. In Japan, they speak Japanese. It was a real challenge to me. I went for 14 days. I rode the subways. I was literally lost on a daily basis. I used the little bit of Japanese that I knew, but I had to fight that fear every day. My book is called Fight the Fear, Overcoming Obstacles That Stand in Your Way, because it talks about how I had to overcome my learning disabilities. And I graduated at the top half of my class in dental school. I went to Temple University School of Dentistry in Philadelphia. I graduated number 54 out of 126. 2 weeks ago, I gave a Zoom lecture at the request of the dean to the alumni and to the students about how I managed to combine my careers as a doctor and in the comedy world. It took me many years to get the courage to go on stage to perform comedy. I wrote comedy for many, many big stars like Rodney Dangerfield and Joan Rivers and Phil Hartman and even Andrew Dice Clay. I wrote for many, many very famous people, for Friars Roast, for things like that. But I didn't have the courage to go on stage myself, even though many people suggested that I should. And about 10 or 15 years ago, I finally got the courage to go up on stage because I told myself, I have to do this. You can't go through your whole life with a dream that you never try to get.
Right.
Because you'll never be comfortable if you do that. You'll have tremendous regrets. And I never wanted to have regrets. So my book, it talks about, you know, all the different fears that we experience. My fears of traveling, my fears of performing, my fears of feeling negative feelings about myself, about fitting in places. I grew up with a lot of different fears. I had a very supportive, loving family, but I still grew up with a lot of fears. Fears of the dark when I was a kid. I started very young, being afraid of so many different things. And I had to learn to confront my uncomfortability. And I do that on a daily basis. Years ago, I made myself go to Europe alone, which was not as scary as Japan, because I spoke some Spanish and I spoke some French and I spoke some Italian. And I went to Spain and Italy. And then the next year, some of my films, I did these short films that were in the Cannes Film Festival. So I went to the festival. But I go by myself every time because it's the scariest thing I could think of to do. And crazy things happen to me. I get lost. I got locked in a bathroom in Spain. I got left on a highway. I had to walk for miles because the bus driver didn't understand my Spanish, and I fell asleep on the bus, which happens to me sometimes when I'm very nervous. I'll fall asleep. And I missed my stop, and he let me off on a highway miles from where I had to go. And you know what? Through all these things, I found my way. I learned to depend on myself, that if I'm very confused, that I'm feeling fear, I can ask someone to help me. So many people have come around to help me. When I was in the hospital recently, the comedy community rallied around me. I used to be a regular on Sirius XM on a show called The Bennington Show. Ron Bennington has the biggest comedy show on Sirius XM radio. And he announced on the radio that I was in the hospital with COVID pneumonia. And I started getting hundreds and hundreds of messages of support from people. And I can't tell you how important that is to a person. Kindness. I want to emphasize being kind to people. When the ambulance came for me, the ambulance driver took my hand and he said to me, "Don't worry, you're going to be okay." And he was amazed that I could climb up on the stretcher by myself. He said most people, they had to carry them to the stretcher. And he said to me, "Of all the people that I've taken to the hospital, you have the best physical presentation that I've seen." And that started this thing of kindness. The nurses were kind. The doctors were kind. The comedy community rallied around me. They made a get well video for me that they put up on YouTube. And as I said, I started getting hundreds and hundreds of messages. Famous comedians like Bill Burr and Nick Kroll and John Mulaney and Jim Norton, Bert Kreischer, they sent me very personal messages telling me how much they cared and that they wanted me to get better right away. And I'm a very strong believer in the power of prayer and the power of thought. When so many people are focusing their energy on one thing, I believe that it has an effect on people. And it certainly helped me because I was too weak to answer. I was so sick, I could barely move. But if that's our time, I just want to emphasize that people can help each other. The support of people outside is so important that every time, even wishing someone a happy birthday, sending someone a message, they may be having a really bad day. You don't know. And then you show that you care about them. It means so much. Everybody is caught up in their own movie, especially now. We're all living with insecurity and fear. And that's another reason I wrote this book during quarantine, because I could have stayed in feeling sorry for myself, but I said I want to use this time in a good way because I'm locked in the house, basically. I haven't visited my kids more than a couple of times, and we sit in the backyard and we social distance. I can't even hug them, you know? So that's why I wrote this book, Fight the Fear, Overcoming Obstacles That Stand in Your Way. And again, that's something that you do all the time, and I really appreciate it.
Nope.
So,
absolutely. I do have a couple of questions for you off the air. I did go over her limit. Wrapping up, how can people follow you on social media? Are you on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram?
Right. My website is ComedyMattersTV.com. My YouTube channel, that's got over 2 million views with interviews with all the top comedians, is youtube.com/ComedyMattersTV. And on Twitter and Instagram, I'm at Jeffrey Gurian, JEFFREYGURIAN. Instagram is much bigger for me. I like being on Instagram lately. But that's it. I'm easy to find. If you Google my name, I'm all over the place.
No, absolutely. And the bottom of the screen will have your name and my name. And I did send you a message on Instagram. Also, wrapping up, when I first approached you to be a guest on my talk show, What was your honest first reaction? What made you say yes, and how do you feel now? Would you recommend it to other people?
Well, when I first got your message, I was not familiar with you, and I looked you up. And when I saw that you talk about overcoming disabilities, it struck a chord with me, because that's what I'm about. That's what I talk about. It's not being limited by your disabilities. Nobody chooses to have disabilities. Some of them we can improve upon. Some we have to accept. Well, we have to accept all of them, but we don't have to stay the way we were. And that's why I was drawn to coming on your show. I was very happy to do it. And I think that everybody can relate to this, because people have, people have all kinds of obstacles in their life to overcome, not only disabilities, physical, mental. There are many, many things. I think that everybody can relate to this, whether you have it or whether you know somebody that has it. So I think it's a very important show, and I think it's the kind of show that everybody would want to listen to.
Nope, absolutely. Now, I do have a couple of questions for you off the air. For
Okay,
wrapping up our interview segment, it was a real honor and privilege having you as a guest, and I'm looking forward to part 2 down the road.
Hi guys, my name is Kat Johnston.
This is Donna Drake.
This is Kayleen.
Hi, my name is Kara Svucek.
I'm Julia Brothers.
Jenna Curtis.
Hey, I'm Jenny Fahn.
Hi, it's Mimi Chin.
Hi, my name is Ella Dorsch.
My name is Shauna Toft.
Hey guys, I'm Anastasia Edwards.
Hi, this is Jackie Nunez.
Actress Becky Hayes.
Hi, I'm Amelia Rose.
Hey there, I'm Saki Mieta.
Hi guys, I'm Alexandria Denise, and you're watching Keith Andrews' show.